One night, one mistake, one act of kindness that changed everything. When Elena Vance found a bleeding stranger in a rainy alley, she didn't call the police. She stitched him up. She thought she was just saving a dying man. She didn't realize she was saving the devil of Chicago. She expected a thank you, maybe some cash. Instead, she woke up the next morning to the sound of engines. When she looked out her window, 200 men in black suits had surrounded her house. They weren't there to kill her. They were there to bow. This is the story of the mafia boss's nurse. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Elena Vance pulled her coat tighter around her shivering frame as she navigated the alleyway behind St. Jude's Memorial Hospital. It was 3 a.m. Her double shift in the ER was over, but the adrenaline hadn't faded. It never did. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee clung to her scrubs. A second skin she couldn't shed. She was 24, drowning in medical school debt, and living in a studio apartment that was little more than a closet with a window. But she was a nurse. It was who she was, down to the marrow. She was just turning the corner toward the bus stop when she heard it. A wet, ragged cough. Elena froze. The sound came from behind a cluster of overflowing dumpsters. A rational woman, a woman who watched the news, would have kept walking. The South Side at this hour was no place for curiosity, but the nurse in her overrode the survival instinct. She stepped into the shadows. "Hello? Do you need help?" There was no answer, just the sound of heavy, labored breathing and the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of rain hitting metal. She pulled out her phone, using the flashlight to cut through the gloom. The beam landed on a pair of Italian leather shoes. Expensive, hand-stitched, ruined by mud. She tracked the light up. Black suit trousers, a torn dress shirt soaked in a dark spreading stain, and finally, a face. He was sitting slumped against the brick wall, one hand pressed violently against his abdomen. Even pale from blood loss, the man was striking. High cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and hair the color of midnight plastered to his forehead. Elena gasped and dropped to her knees, the wet pavement soaking instantly through her scrubs. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyes snapped open. They were gray, storm cloud gray, and terrifyingly lucid. In a split second, a silver pistol was leveled at the center of her forehead. "Walk away," he rasped. The voice was like gravel grinding together. Elena put her hands up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You're bleeding out. I'm a nurse. Put the gun down." "No doctors," he spat, his hand trembling not from fear but from shock. "No hospitals. They'll finish the job." "I'm not a hospital." "I'm Elena," she said, her voice shaking but firm. She looked at the wound. It was a gunshot, likely low caliber, but it had nicked something vascular. The blood was bright red, oxygenated. "If you don't let me apply pressure, you will be dead in 4 minutes. Walk away, and you die. Shoot me, and you die. Your choice." The stranger stared at her. The rain blurred his vision, but he could see the defiance in her brown eyes. He was Dante Salvatore, the capo of the Chicago outfit, the man they called Il Mietitore, the Reaper. He had killed men for looking at him wrong. But right now, his vision was tunneling, the gun lowered by an inch. Elena didn't wait for permission. She moved. "I need to get you inside," she said, looking around. Her apartment building was the back entrance to this alley. "Can you stand?" "I can do anything," he gritted out. He was heavy, a wall of muscle and dead weight. Elena groaned as she hauled him up, his arm draped over her shoulder. He smelled of expensive cologne, gunpowder, and iron. They stumbled through the service door of her building, up 2 flights of narrow stairs and into her tiny apartment. She kicked the door shut and guided him to the small sofa. Don't call anyone," Dante murmured, his eyes fluttering shut. "Save your breath." Elena was already moving. She grabbed her emergency medical kit, stolen supplies from the hospital she kept for neighborhood kids who couldn't afford a doctor. Lidocaine, sutures, gauze, saline. She ripped his shirt open. The bullet had passed through the oblique muscle. Through and through. Lucky. but the exit wound was messy. "I have to clean this," she said, pouring saline over the wound. Dante hissed, his hand gripping the edge of the sofa so hard the fabric tore. "Whiskey," he demanded. "I have cheap vodka. Take it or leave it." She shoved a bottle of generic vodka into his hand. He took a long pull, the liquor burning his throat, grounding him. "I'm going to stitch you up," Elena said, threading a needle with practiced hands. "I don't have general anesthesia, just local. It's going to hurt." "Do it." For the next hour, the only sounds in the apartment were the rain against the window and the sharp inhales of the man on her couch. Elena worked with the precision of a surgeon. She cleaned, she packed, she stitched. She was in the zone, her fear replaced by professional competence. When she tied off the final suture, she sat back, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her hands were stained with his blood. Dante looked down at his side. The bandage was neat, professional. The bleeding had stopped. He looked up at her, really seeing her for the first time. She was small, with messy curls escaping her bun and tired eyes that held a surprising depth of kindness. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice stronger now. "Elena, I told you." "Why did you help me, Elena?" She stood up and walked to the sink to wash her hands, the water turning pink. "Because the Hippocratic Oath doesn't come with an exclusion clause for gangsters." Dante let out a low, dark chuckle that turned into a cough. "You know who I am?" "I know you have a $2,000 suit and a bullet hole in your side. That usually means trouble." She turned back to him, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You need rest. Fluids. You shouldn't move for at least 12 hours. Dante tried to sit up, wincing. "I can't stay here. It's not safe for you." "It's pouring rain and you've lost a pint of blood. You're staying." She tossed a blanket at him. "I have a shift in 6 hours. You can leave before I get back. Just don't steal my TV. It's still on installment plan." Dante caught the blanket. He stared at her, searching for the deception, the trap. In his world, kindness was always a currency used to buy a betrayal, but he found nothing but exhaustion and honesty in her face. "Thank you," he said. The words felt foreign on his tongue. "Go to sleep." Elena collapsed onto her bed, which was only 5 feet away in the studio layout. She thought she would lie awake, terrified of the killer on her couch, but the exhaustion of the shift took over. Within minutes, she was asleep. When her alarm went off at 7 a.m., the sunlight was streaming through the blinds. Elena sat up with a jolt, remembering the night. She looked at the sofa. It was empty. The blanket was folded neatly. The bloody bandages were gone, likely taken to prevent leaving DNA. The empty vodka bottle was in the trash. On her small coffee table, there was a stack of cash. A thick stack. $100 bills bound by a rubber band. Elena stared at it. It had to be $10,000. Enough to pay off a chunk of her loans. Enough to move out of this dump, but beside the money was a note, written on a napkin in jagged, powerful handwriting. "A life for a life. You bought yourself a future, Elena, but forget my face. For your own sake." She shivered, despite the morning heat. She locked the door, hid the money in her freezer, and went to work, telling herself it was just a fever dream, a crazy one-time event. She would never see him again. She was wrong. The next morning, Elena called in sick. The adrenaline crash from the previous night had left her trembling, and the sight of the frozen money in her fridge made her nauseous. She needed coffee, and she needed normal. She put on a robe and shuffled to her kitchenette to boil water. It was unusually quiet outside. Usually, by 9 a.m., the street below was a cacophony of honking taxis, shouting vendors, and the rattle of the L train in the distance. Today, there was only a low, vibrating hum, like a swarm of bees. Elena frowned. She walked to the window and pulled back the cheap plastic blinds. The mug of coffee slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Oh my God! The street below, her narrow, pothole-riddled street in the south side, was unrecognizable. It was a sea of black SUVs. Escalades, Suburbans, Mercedes G-Wagons. They were parked bumper to bumper, lining both sides of the street for 3 blocks, completely blocking traffic. And the men. There were hundreds of them. Men in sharp, tailored black suits stood shoulder to shoulder on the sidewalks. They weren't talking. They weren't smoking. They were standing at attention, their hands clasped in front of them or resting near their waistbands, where Elena knew weapons were concealed. The neighbors were peering out of their windows, terrified. The local corner store owner had locked his grate. The world had stopped. At the center of the formation, directly in front of her apartment building's entrance, stood a man. He was flanked by 4 giants who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. But the man in the middle was the one who drew the eye. He wore a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Elena's entire education. He had sunglasses on, but as he looked up toward her 3rd-floor window, he took them off. Storm cloud gray eyes. It was him, the man from the alley. Elena stumbled back from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Why? Had she done something wrong? Was the wound infected? Did he think she snitched? A heavy knock pounded on her door. Boom! 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 Elena scrambled backward, grabbing a kitchen knife, a pathetic defense against an army. Miss Vance? A deep voice boomed through the wood. Open the door. Don Dante requests your presence. Don Dante. The name hit her like a physical blow. The rumors, the news stories. Dante Salvatore. The head of the Salvatore crime family. The man who controlled the docks, the unions, and half the politicians in Illinois. She had stitched up the Mafia king of Chicago with a sewing kit and generic vodka. Go away! She screamed, her voice cracking. Miss Vance, we are not here to hurt you, the voice said, calmer now but authoritative. But we are not leaving without you. And we have blocked the street. The police cannot get within 2 miles of here. Open the door. Elena looked at the knife. Then she looked at the window. 200 men. There was no escape. Trembling, she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. A crack. A mountain of a man stood there. He had a scar running down his cheek and looked like he could bench press a truck. This was Luca, Dante's consigliere and right-hand man. Luca bowed. He actually bowed. Miss Vance, Luca said, his tone respectful, almost reverent. Please, the Don is waiting. Am I being arrested? Kidnapped? Neither, Luca said. He gestured to the hallway. You are being escorted. Elena didn't have a choice. She put on jeans and a sweater, stepped over the shattered coffee mug, and walked out. The walk from her apartment door to the street was a blur. When she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the silence was deafening. As soon as her foot hit the pavement, a sound rippled through the crowd of men. It was the sound of 200 men shifting their stance simultaneously. Then, in perfect unison, they bowed their heads. Elena stopped dead. They were bowing to her. Dante Salvatore stood by the open door of a black armored limousine. He looked better than he had the night before. Clean-shaven, hair slicked back, power radiating off him like heat waves. But he moved stiffly, favoring his left side. He didn't bow. He watched her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He extended a hand. Elena, he said smoothly. What is this? She whispered, gesturing to the army occupying her street. You gave me money. We were square. The situation has changed, Dante said, his eyes scanning the rooftops, ever vigilant. Last night, my enemies didn't just miss. They were watching. They saw you help me. They saw your face. Elena felt the blood drain from her cheeks. What does that mean? It means, Dante said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, that as of this morning, there is a $500,000 bounty on your head. The Kovac cartel wants to finish what they started, and they think you're the loose end. He nodded at the men surrounding them. These men are not here to threaten you, Elena. They are here because you are the only person in this city who touched Dante Salvatore and didn't ask for a favor. You saved my life. He reached out and gently took her hand. His grip was warm, calloused, and possessive. Now, I'm going to save yours. Get in the car. "And if I refuse?" Elena asked. Though she knew the answer, Dante looked at her, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Look around, tesoro." "Does it look like I take no for an answer?" She looked at the wall of black suits. She looked at the neighborhood she had lived in for 3 years, which had suddenly become a war zone. She looked at Dante's eyes, which held a terrifying promise of violence toward anyone who touched her. She got in the car. As the heavy door thudded shut, sealing her in the scent of leather and expensive cologne, Dante tapped the glass. The convoy began to move. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, sinking into the plush seat. Dante poured 2 glasses of sparkling water and handed her one. "Home," he said. "Or, more specifically, my home. The fortress. It's the only place in Chicago where the Kovacs can't reach you." "For how long?" Dante took a sip, his eyes darkening. "Until I burn every single one of them to the ground." The car sped up, merging onto the highway, flanked by a dozen escort vehicles. Elena watched the city blur past. She had woken up a nurse with a student loan problem. She was going to bed as the ward, and perhaps the prisoner, of the most dangerous man in America. The Salvatore estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Located in the affluent suburb of Lake Forest, surrounded by acres of manicured woods and 10-foot iron fences, it screamed old money and hidden sins. As the armored SUV crunched up the gravel driveway, Elena stared out the tinted window. The property was beautiful, ivy crawling up gray stone walls, a fountain in the center of a circular drive, and statues that looked like they belonged in a museum. But Elena also saw the cameras. They were everywhere, nestled in the oak trees, mounted on the gargoyles, swiveling silently to track the car. And the men. More men in suits patrolling the perimeter with assault rifles slung casually over their shoulders. "Welcome to Castello di Ferro," Dante murmured as the car came to a halt. The Iron Castle. The door was opened by a uniformed driver. Dante stepped out first, offering a hand to help her down. Elena ignored it, stepping out on her own. She wasn't a damsel, and she wasn't a guest. "My apartment," she said, her voice tight. "My cat, my job. You can't just erase my life, Dante." Dante signaled to Luca, the giant with the scar. "Send a team to retrieve Miss Vance's cat. Clear out her apartment. Make it look like she moved out in a hurry. Pay the landlord double the lease break fee." He turned his cold gray eyes back to Elena. "As for your job, St. Jude's will receive a notification that you have taken a sabbatical for family reasons. Your loans will be paid in full by noon." Elena felt dizzy. "You can't just buy people." "I can buy anything, Elena, especially when it keeps them alive." He led her inside. The foyer was cavernous, with marble floors that echoed under their feet, and a chandelier that looked like a frozen explosion of crystal. A line of staff waited. Maids, cooks, groundskeepers. They all bowed as Dante passed. "Marta," Dante called out. An older woman with stern features and a tight bun stepped forward. She wore a black dress and a white apron. "Si, signore?" "This is Elena. She is under my protection. She is to be treated with the same respect you show me. Give her the East Wing suite. Get her clothes. Anything she needs." Marta's eyes widened slightly. The East Wing was the master suite area, but she nodded quickly. "Of course. Come with me, signorina." "I need to talk to you," Elena said, grabbing Dante's arm. The staff gasped. No one touched the Don. Dante looked at her hand on his bicep, then up to her eyes. He didn't pull away. "I have business to attend to. A war is starting, Elena. I have to manage the fallout of your little rescue mission. Go with Marta. We will dine at 8. He turned and walked toward a set of double oak doors, flanked by Luca and 2 other guards. Elena watched him go, feeling a mix of rage and terrified awe. She was a prisoner. A prisoner in a palace, but a prisoner nonetheless. The room Marta led her to was bigger than her entire apartment. It had a 4-poster bed, a balcony overlooking the gardens, and a bathroom with a soaking tub the size of a small pool. A walk-in closet was already being stocked by 2 young maids, carrying armfuls of designer clothes. Gucci, Prada, Yves Saint Laurent. I don't wear this stuff, Elena said, picking up a silk dress. I wear scrubs and jeans. Mr. Salvatore insists on the best, Marta said, her tone clipping. Dinner is formal. Please be ready. Left alone, Elena paced the room. She checked the door, unlocked, but she knew there were guards in the hall. She checked the balcony, 3 stories up, sheer drop. She was trapped. At 8 p.m., Elena descended the grand staircase. She had refused the silk dresses, opting instead for the simplest thing she could find in the closet, a black cocktail dress that was modest, but clung to her curves in a way that made her feel exposed. The dining room was dimly lit by candlelight. Dante sat at the head of a long mahogany table set for 20, though it was just the 2 of them. He was reading a file, a glass of dark red wine near his hand. He looked up as she entered, and for a second, the mask of the ruthless mob boss slipped. His eyes traveled from her hemline to her face, darkening with an emotion she couldn't place. Hunger? Regret? Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair to his right. I'm not hungry. Sit anyway. She sat. Servants appeared instantly, placing plates of truffle risotto and seared scallops in front of them. So, Elena said, stabbing a scallop with her fork, how does this work? Do I just live here until I die of old age? Or until your enemies blow this place up? Dante closed the file. The Kovac cartel is aggressive, but they are not stupid. They won't attack the fortress directly. They will try to draw me out, or they will try to find a weakness. And I'm the weakness, Elena realized. That's why I'm here. Not just to protect me, but to keep them from using me as leverage against you. Dante took a sip of wine. You are perceptive, yes. If Victor Kovac gets you, he will torture you for days just to make me listen to it over the phone. He knows I owe you a life debt. In our world, honor is everything. If I let my savior die, I lose the respect of my men. I lose control. So I'm a political asset. You are a guest, Dante corrected, and you are safe. That is what matters. Safe? Elena laughed, a harsh sound. I saw the guns, Dante. I saw the look in your eyes last night. You kill people. How am I safe with you? Dante leaned forward. The candlelight cast shadows across his sharp features. Because, Elena, I am the monster that other monsters fear. And right now, you are the only thing in this world I give a damn about keeping whole. The admission hung in the air, heavy and electric. Elena's breath hitched. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to run, but looking at the man who had bled on her couch, who was now moving heaven and earth to shield her, she felt a dangerous pull in her chest. Suddenly the doors burst open. Luca strode in, his face pale. Boss! We have a problem! Dante didn't look away from Elena. I'm eating. It's Marco, Luca said urgently. He's missing, and the security feed in the West Sector just looped. Dante was on his feet in an instant, a gun appearing in his hand from a holster beneath the table. The transformation was terrifyingly fast. Elena, get under the table, he commanded. What? Now! Before she could move, the stained glass window behind Dante shattered. The sound of the sniper rifle was a thunderclap. Dante moved faster than humanly possible. He didn't dive for cover. He dove for her. He tackled Elena, knocking her chair backward, shielding her body with his own as they crashed to the floor. A second bullet decimated the wine bottle on the table, spraying red liquid and glass like shrapnel. Stay down, Dante roared, pressing her head into the thick carpet. Alarm sirens began to wail throughout the estate. The heavy oak doors were kicked open, and a dozen of Dante's men poured in, weapons raised, forming a defensive circle around their don. Report! Dante barked, dragging Elena toward the corner of the room where the walls were thick stone. He checked her quickly. No blood, just shock. Perimeter breach. Luca shouted into his radio. West Garden? They bypassed the sensors. It's an inside job, Dante growled, his face a mask of fury. Someone looped the cameras. Stay here with Luca. Where are you going? Elena grabbed his sleeve. Her hands were shaking. To take out the trash. Dante racked the slide of his pistol and vanished into the hallway, followed by 6 of his men. Elena sat huddled in the corner, her heart pounding in her ears. Luca stood over her, a submachine gun trained on the door. "Is he going to be okay?" she whispered. Luca looked down at her. "The boss? Yeah. I'd worry about the other guys." 10 minutes of agonizing silence followed, punctuated only by distant shouts and the muffled pop of gunfire. Then, silence. Dante returned. He had removed his suit jacket, his white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, and his hands were red. Not with wine. "It's done," he said flatly. "Luca, clean it up." He walked over to Elena and extended a hand. She hesitated, looking at the blood on his knuckles. "It's not mine," he said softly. She took his hand, and he pulled her up. He didn't let go. He pulled her close, inspecting her face for cuts. "Did I hurt you when I took you down?" I'm fine." She was trembling. "Who was it?" "Assassin sent by Kovac, let in by a traitor." Dante's jaw tightened. "Marco, my capo for the north side. He sold the security codes." "Where is he?" Elena asked, dreading the answer. "He is no longer a concern." Dante led her out of the dining room, away from the shattered glass. "This house is compromised. We leave tonight." "Leave? Go where?" "I have a safe house. A penthouse in the city, the Loop. High security, impenetrable. We can't stay here while I purge the organization." They moved quickly. A convoy was assembled within minutes. This time, Elena sat next to Dante in the back of the armored limousine, his hand resting on his thigh, inches from hers. The air between them was thick with adrenaline. "You saved me again," Elena whispered. Dante looked out the window at the passing streetlights. "I told you, Elena. You stitched me up. Now I keep you breathing. That is the deal." "Is that all it is? A deal?" Dante turned to her. In the shadows of the car, his guard dropped. He looked exhausted, haunted. He reached out and tucked a loose curl behind her ear. His touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "If it were just a deal, I would have sent you to Europe with a new identity," he murmured. "But I couldn't do it." "Why not?" "Because I'm a selfish man, and I couldn't stand the thought of never seeing you again." Elena's breath caught. Before she could respond, Dante pulled away, his face hardening again. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." "Why?" "Because tomorrow is the governor's charity gala," Dante said, "and we are going." "Are you insane?" Elena stared at him. "People just tried to kill us." "And you want to go to a party?" "If I don't show my face, they will think I am weak. They will think I am running. In this city, weakness is a death sentence. I have to stand in the center of the room and show them that Dante Salvatore is untouchable." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "And you are coming with me. You will be my date. We will show them that not only am I alive, but I have the most beautiful woman in Chicago by my side. It's a power move, Elena." "I'm a nurse, not a mafia prop." "Tomorrow night," Dante said, his voice leaving no room for argument, "you are the Queen of Chicago. Act like it." The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and fake smiles. The governor's charity gala was the biggest event of the year, attended by politicians, CEOs, and the shadowy figures who pulled their strings. Elena felt like she was walking to her execution, but she looked like a goddess. Dante had provided a dress, a floor-length gown of emerald green silk with a slit that went up to her thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. A diamond necklace, cold and heavy, rested against her collarbone. "Breathe," Dante whispered in her ear as they stood at the top of the grand staircase. His hand was warm on the small of her back. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, hiding the holster beneath his arm. "Everyone is staring," Elena hissed through a fixed smile. "Let them stare. They're wondering who you are. They're wondering how I survived the hit yesterday. Let them wonder." They descended the stairs, and the room seemed to tilt toward them. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Dante Salvatore walked with the arrogance of a king, and Elena, chin held high, matched his stride. They moved through the crowd. Dante introduced her to senators and judges, men who shook his hand with sweaty palms, knowing exactly where his money came from. Elena played her part. She smiled, she nodded, she sipped champagne she didn't drink. But her eyes were scanning the room. She was looking for threats. "Relax," Dante murmured, pulling her onto the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. "My men are at every exit. The waiters? Half of them are mine. And the other half? Let's hope they are just waiters." He spun her, pulling her flush against his chest. For a moment, the danger faded. There was just the music, the scent of him, and the strength of his arms. Elena looked up into his gray eyes and saw something there that terrified her more than the guns. Tenderness. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice rough. "Dante." "I know. I'm a criminal. You're a healer. We are oil and water." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "But tell me you don't feel this. Tell me you don't feel the fire when I touch you." Elena opened her mouth to deny it, but the lie died on her tongue. She did feel it. The rush, the heat. It was intoxicating. Crash. The massive crystal chandelier above the center of the room didn't fall. It exploded. Screams erupted. The room plunged into chaos. "Get down!" Dante shouted, spinning Elena around and shielding her as gunfire erupted from the balcony above. This wasn't a sniper. This was a massacre. Men in tactical gear were rappelling down from the mezzanine, firing automatic weapons into the ceiling to herd the crowd. "It's Kovac!" Luca appeared out of the crowd, firing 2 pistols at the attackers. "They breached the service elevators!" "Get Elena to the kitchen!" Dante ordered, returning fire with a calm precision that was chilling. He shot an attacker mid-air, the body crashing onto the buffet table. "I'm not leaving you!" Elena grabbed his arm. "Go! Now!" "No!" Elena saw a waiter, one of the innocent ones, clutching his chest, blood spurting between his fingers. The nurse instinct took over. She broke from Dante's grip and ran toward the wounded man. "Elena!" Dante roared. She slid across the polished floor, ripping the hem of her expensive gown to make a compress. "Pressure! I need pressure!" she yelled at a terrified woman nearby. Bullets chipped the marble floor inches from her heels. Dante saw her exposed. He saw a gunman on the balcony taking aim at her. "No!" Dante abandoned his cover. He sprinted across the open floor, a target for every gun in the room. He fired blindly at the balcony to suppress the shooter, sliding in front of Elena just as the gunman fired. Dante jerked violently. Elena looked up. Dante was standing over her, swaying. His tuxedo jacket was torn at the shoulder, blood beginning to bloom rapidly. "Dante!" He grabbed her with his good arm, hauling her up. "Kitchen, now!" He didn't collapse. He didn't falter. He dragged her and the wounded waiter toward the swinging doors of the kitchen, firing back with his other hand. They burst into the kitchen, Luca and 3 other guards slamming the heavy doors behind them and barring them with an industrial refrigerator. "You're hit!" Elena cried, her hands already on him. "It's a scratch," Dante lied, leaning heavily against a stainless steel prep table. His face was gray. "It's not a scratch. It's the subclavian artery if you're unlucky." Elena ripped his bow tie off and tore his shirt open. The wound was high on the shoulder. Ugly. Bleeding fast. "We have to move," Luca said, checking his earpiece. "They have the exits blocked. We're trapped." "The freezer!" Dante gasped, his legs buckling. Elena caught him, struggling under his weight. "There's a service hatch in the meat locker." They dragged him into the walk-in freezer. The cold hit them instantly. It was 20 degrees below zero. "Prop the door!" Luca shouted. Elena laid Dante down on the metal floor amidst hanging sides of beef. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Elena," Dante whispered, gripping her hand. His hand was freezing. "If they get in, use my gun. Don't let them take you." "Shut up," Elena commanded, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her hands into the bullet wound. "You don't get to die on me. Not after all this. You owe me a life, remember? You haven't paid up yet. Dante looked at her, his vision blurring. He smiled, a weak, genuine smile. I owe you everything. The sound of a blowtorch cutting through the kitchen door echoed outside. The Kovacs were coming. They were trapped in a freezer, the Don was bleeding out, and their only defense was a few handguns and a nurse who refused to let the devil die. The orange glow of the blowtorch cut through the heavy steel door of the meat locker like a laser. Sparks showered onto the frozen floor. We have 30 seconds, Luca gritted out, shoving a heavy crate of frozen pork against the door to buy time. Dante was pale, his breath misting in the freezing air. He was losing blood fast, but his eyes were sharp. He pointed to a rusted metal grate in the floor, half hidden by a stack of boxes. The refuse chute leads to the sub-basement, garbage disposal. Elena didn't hesitate. She grabbed a metal hook from the wall and jammed it into the grate, prying it open with a groan of effort. It clattered aside, revealing a dark, foul-smelling slide. Go, Dante ordered. You first, Elena countered. If you pass out halfway down, I can't catch you. Dante didn't argue. He slid into the darkness. Elena followed, Luca bringing up the rear just as the freezer door blew inward with a deafening boom. They tumbled down the chute, landing hard on a pile of discarded cardboard and trash bags in the humid, dimly lit basement. Dante groaned, clutching his shoulder, fresh blood seeping through Elena's makeshift bandage. Move, Dante commanded, forcing himself up. They navigated the labyrinth of the hotel's underbelly, emerging into a back alley miles away from the chaos of the ballroom. A nondescript sedan, one of Dante's emergency stash cars, was parked under a flickering light. Luca hotwired it in seconds. They peeled out of the alley just as sirens began to wail in the distance. Where are we going? Elena asked, her hands pressed hard against Dante's wound. The gym, Dante murmured, his eyes closing. South Side. The gym turned out to be Sal's boxing club, a decrepit brick building that smelled of sweat and old leather. It was closed for the night, but Luca had a key. They brought Dante into the back office, sweeping aside piles of paperwork to lay him on a leather table. I need supplies, Elena barked, her nurse mode fully engaged. Now. Luca raided the gym's first aid locker, returning with rubbing alcohol, clean towels, and a suture kit used for boxers' cuts. It wasn't a sterile ER, but it would have to do. This is going to hurt more than last time, Elena warned, cutting away Dante's ruined shirt. The bullet was lodged deep in the muscle. Dante looked at her. He was sweating, his skin clammy. Just talk to me, Elena. Keep me here. You're an idiot, she said, her voice shaking as she poured alcohol over the wound. Dante hissed, his back arching off the table. You jumped in front of a gun. Who does that? A man who protects what is his, he rasped. Elena's hand stilled for a second, then resumed working. She dug for the bullet with the tweezers. I'm not yours, Dante. I'm just the woman fixing your mess. You are mine, he growled, grabbing her wrist with his good hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were blazing. You think I jumped because of a debt? I jumped because the thought of a world without you in it. It terrified me. Elena stared at him. The bullet clinked into a metal tray. Got it, she whispered. She quickly stitched the wound, her heart pounding a rhythm against her ribs that matched his. She bandaged him up, wiping the blood from his chest with a warm towel. When she finished, she didn't pull away. She rested her forehead against his uninjured shoulder. You almost died. Almost doesn't count. Dante reached up and stroked her hair. You saved me again. That makes 3 times. I'm running out of ways to repay you. Stay alive, she said fiercely. That's how you repay me. Kill the bastards who did this. Dante's expression shifted. The tenderness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage. He sat up, ignoring the pain. Luca, he called out. The giant appeared in the doorway. Boss, the boys are rallying. We have 50 men outside. The rest are locking down the city. Kovac thinks I'm dead, Dante said, standing up. He swayed slightly, then steadied himself. He looked like a fallen angel. shirtless, bandaged, covered in blood, and utterly terrifying. He will be celebrating. He'll be at the Red Velvet Lounge. It's his victory spot. "We hit him now?" Luca asked. "We hit him with everything," Dante said. He walked over to a wall safe, spun the dial, and pulled out 2 semi-automatic pistols and a black tactical vest. He winced as he pulled the vest over his bandages. "Dante, you can't go," Elena pleaded. "You've lost too much blood." He turned to her, buckling the vest. "Tonight ends it, Elena. If I wait, they will hunt you forever. I have to cut the head off the snake." He walked over to her, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. It was a kiss of desperation, of promise, of blood and iron. "Wait here," he whispered against her lips. "Luca has left 2 guards. If I don't come back by dawn—" He hesitated. "There is a plane waiting at O'Hare. Go to Sicily. My cousin will protect you." "Come back," she ordered, grabbing his vest. "You come back to me." "For you," he said. "I would walk out of hell." He turned and walked out into the night, the sound of 50 car engines roaring to life, signaling the beginning of the end. The bass inside the Red Velvet Lounge was loud enough to rattle the teeth of everyone inside. It was a fortress of neon, smoke, and expensive sin located in the heart of Chicago's River North District. Tonight, however, the doors were locked to the public. Victor Kovac, the man who had ordered the hit on the Salvatore estate, stood on the VIP mezzanine overlooking the dance floor. He held a crystal glass of cognac, watching his soldiers celebrate. They were drunk on victory, convinced that the King of Chicago was currently bleeding to death in a meat locker. "Turn the music up," Victor roared, raising his glass. "Tonight, we own this city. To Dante Salvatore, may he rot in hell." A cheer went up from the floor, a guttural roar from 50 armed men. They laughed, clinking bottles, unaware that they were toasting their own execution. The front entrance of the club was a wall of reinforced glass. Suddenly, headlights blinded the bouncers stationed outside. There was no screech of brakes, no hesitation. With a deafening crash that drowned out the bass, a black-armored SUV plowed through the glass facade. Metal screamed against stone, and shards of glass sprayed across the dance floor like deadly confetti. The vehicle crushed the reception desk, skidding to a halt in the center of the room, steam hissing from its crumpled grill. The music cut out. The laughter died. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the settling dust and the ticking of the SUV's cooling engine. Then, the driver's door kicked open. Dante Salvatore stepped out. He looked like a vision from a nightmare. He had discarded his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was torn and soaked in crimson at the shoulder, strapped down by a black tactical vest bristling with ammunition. His face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes were burning with a cold gray fire. He didn't look like a man who was dying. He looked like death itself. "You celebrated too early, Victor," Dante said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the terrified silence it carried to the mezzanine like the toll of a funeral bell. Victor Kovac scrambled back from the railing, knocking over his cognac, his face drained of color. "Kill him!" he shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. "Kill him now!" The room erupted. Dante didn't seek cover. He moved forward, an unstoppable force of vengeance. As the first Kovac soldier raised a pistol, Dante raised his assault rifle. Bang! Bang! The man dropped. 50 of Dante's most loyal enforcers poured through the breach behind their don, fanning out to engage the room. The club became a war zone. Muzzle flashes lit up the smoke like strobe lights. Bottles exploded behind the bar. Dante moved through the chaos with a terrifying focus. His injured shoulder screamed in protest with every recoil of his weapon, sending spikes of white-hot agony down his spine. He gritted his teeth, shoving the pain into a dark corner of his mind. He wasn't fighting for territory tonight. He wasn't fighting for money. He was fighting for the woman waiting in the dark. He cleared a path to the stairs, dropping a man who charged him with a knife. He climbed toward the mezzanine, his boots heavy on the metal steps. Victor Kovac was fumbling with the lock on his office door, trying to flee to the roof. He managed to get the door open just as Dante reached the top of the stairs. Victor turned, raising a gold-plated Desert Eagle. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't aim. Dante didn't even slow down. He swung the stock of his empty rifle, cracking Victor's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Dante shoved him backward into the office. Victor stumbled, crashing into his mahogany desk and scattering papers everywhere. "Dante, wait," Victor pleaded, holding up his hands. "We can make a deal. I'll give you the North Side. I'll give you the unions. Millions, Dante. Just let me leave." Dante drew a long, serrated combat knife from his vest. He stepped closer, the smell of gunpowder and blood clinging to him. "You shot up my city," Dante said, his voice a low growl. "You corrupted my men." "It's just business," Victor cried, backing up until he hit the window. "We're the same, you and I! We are not the same!" Dante lunged, grabbing Victor by the throat and slamming him down onto the desk. He leaned in, his face inches from the man who had tried to take everything from him. "Your fatal mistake," Dante whispered, the knife hovering over Victor's chest, "was that you made her cry." Victor's eyes widened in confusion. "The nurse? She's nobody! She's just a civilian!" "She is my queen," Dante snarled. He drove the knife down. It was a single, clean strike. The debt was paid. Back at Sal's boxing club, the silence was suffocating. Elena sat on a folding chair in the back office, her eyes fixed on the door. Her hands were stained with Dante's blood from earlier. The clock on the wall ticked maddeningly slow. "Miss Vance!" Enzo, the young guard by the door, said softly, "The plane is fueled. If he's not back in 10 minutes, my orders are to get you out of the country." "I'm not going," Elena said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I am not leaving him behind." "If he failed, Kovac will be coming here next," Enzo warned. "Then let them come." Suddenly, tires screeched in the alleyway. Enzo raised his submachine gun, racking the slide. "Get behind the desk," he ordered. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She grabbed a scalpel from the medical kit, her knuckles white. The back door swung open. A figure stood in the shadows, swaying. "Enzo," a rough voice rasped. "Stand down." "Dante!" Elena scrambled over the desk, ignoring Enzo's shout. She ran to him just as Dante's legs gave out. She caught him, her small frame straining under his weight as they sank to the floor together. He was a wreck. Fresh blood soaked his vest. His face was gray with exhaustion, but he was breathing. He was alive. "You idiot," she sobbed, pressing her forehead against his chest. "You absolute idiot. You came back." Dante groaned, leaning his head back against the wall. He reached up, his hand shaking, and cupped her face. His thumb brushed away a tear. "I told you," he whispered, a weak smile touching his lips. "For you, I would walk out of hell." "Shut up," she cried, laughing through her tears. "Just shut up and let me fix you." The late summer sun cast a golden haze over the Salvatore estate. The fortress was no longer a prison. The gates were open, and the guards wore tuxedos instead of tactical gear. Elena sat on a stone bench in the center of the rose garden. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She wore a dress of pale yellow silk that flowed around her like water. She looked up as a shadow fell over her. Dante stood there. He looked different. Lighter. The weight of the constant war had lifted from his shoulders. He sat beside her, the movement fluid, though a scar on his shoulder would forever mark the night he almost died for her. "You're hiding," he said, his voice warm. "I'm thinking," she smiled, "about that night in the alley, if I had just walked away." "But you didn't." Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn, folded napkin. The ink was faded, but the words were still clear. "A life for a life." "I kept it," he said softly. "To remind me." "Remind you of what? That I saved you?" "To remind me that I owe you everything. I was a dead man walking until you found me, Elena." Elena took the napkin from his hand. She looked him in the eye, then slowly tore the paper in half. She let the pieces flutter to the grass. "The debt is paid, Dante. We're even." Dante caught her hand. He slid off the bench, dropping to one knee in the dirt. Elena's breath hitched. "Dante." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond the size of a hazelnut glittered in the sunlight, flawless, sharp, and indestructible. "I don't want to be even," Dante said, looking up at her with a devotion that brought the king of Chicago to his knees. "I want to be yours. I want to build a kingdom that is worthy of you. Elena Vance, will you marry me? Will you take the monster and make him a man?" Tears pricked Elena's eyes. She saw the danger, she saw the scars, but she also saw the heart beneath them that beat only for her. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him up. 1,000 times, yes. Dante kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the garden in fire and gold. The nurse had saved the Mafia boss, but in the end, he had saved her right back. And Chicago belonged to them. And that, my friends, is the story of Elena and Dante. From a bloody alleyway to the throne of the underworld. It just goes to show that sometimes the most dangerous paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. I have to ask, did you think Dante went too far with Kovac, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a romance, please smash that like button. It helps the channel so much. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. I've got a psychological thriller coming up next week that will keep you awake at night. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.